So this video is about two things. It's about authenticity and it's about education. We're going to meet back up with both of them at the end, but we'll start with authenticity. And we're going to start with the concept of a shoot and a work, which comes from pro wrestling, which I enjoy. And so the definition of a shoot is something unscripted and real. And the definition of a work is something that's scripted, and there may be, real things behind it, but it's definitely in character and things like that. And so while I've been attempting to find the voice of this channel, I've been oscillating between shoots and works. Early on, it was fun to just shoot for 28 minutes on opening the DSM-5 and giving some perspective about the things that we would read in that, and the work would be some more recent content where there were not necessarily verbatim scripts, though verbatim scripts have been used in order to create a more, I guess, structured sort of discussion so that I don't ramble on for 28 minutes, in which case I rambled on for 28 minutes anyway. So we're going to be using the format of a worked shoot from now on, and that'll be a lot of fun. Works, scripted content cuts down on the unos and ums that and long pauses that I could possibly do. But at the same time, there's a lot more kind of dynamic conversation happens when I'm just shooting about a topic or whatnot. So what where that comes into play for the second part, education, is I just briefly describe how I got to this point, and this is as I have a 4-year degree as in Bachelor's of Science in Psychology, and I'm a first year doctoral student for a Doctorate of Psychology, and this is not my previous form. Previously, I've done web comics. I've administrated and participated in writers groups. I've written 8 novels. I've been a photographer. I was a college DJ. All these things may not translate and may not be exactly useful to YouTube, but no, I am not one of these people that did my first YouTube video back in 2006, 2010, 2014. I'm new to this scene, and I'm pretty happy about that. I feel pretty fresh. So I may not be fresh to the concepts or anything like that, but at least I'm excited about being able to have these conversations in public, and I feel like I'm finally have the preparation necessary to do so, and that's where education comes in. So rather than doing a big pros and cons about is a 4-year formal education necessary to be a legitimate human being, which is bullshit. I think we can all agree on that. Is a 4-year education useful whatsoever as an individual? And which I would say absolutely. And I started my college career into my 30s, which would be definitely a non-traditional student and late to the scene. And I think I'm probably better prepared for that. I would have made a pretty crummy student as a 20-year-old because I had a lot of things I wanted to do for myself and on my own, and didn't have financial resources, or I didn't know about them. Nowadays, I would advise people of their options, especially in their mid-20s. You have a lot more financial aid options than you would as a traditional student. So, but in any case, as a non-traditional student in my 30s, I really do feel that I was well prepared to engage in the academic system in a way where I probably wasn't going to be very successful beforehand. Uh, when we come to, I know I just said this wasn't going to be pros and cons, but that's kind of our default way of looking at things. And I will still avoid pros and cons, but we will be looking at questions. And the questions we're asking is when people say, in online spaces or whatever, they're like, well, get educated on that topic and then your mind will change. And I do think that that can be somewhat reductive because, in my experience, education has not changed my mind about any single topic that I've, especially any kind of moral topic. So, yeah, my politics and ethics are exactly the same. Yeah, pretty much. I may have shifted a little bit more towards, I don't know, even that's a discussion. I'll quit umming. So the umming about that was about things like disability psychology and things like that. And so previously, I might not have known the sort of institutional biases against disabled people or differently abled, whatever, uh, and how to engage in that topic in general. Whereas now I would be a lot more prepared to be able to hear perspectives about how not everyone needs a cure and how the medical model is extremely biased against people that are just experiencing their daily life. So just because people are born or develop certain conditions doesn't mean that everything needs to be cured. That's obviously not something I knew 4 years ago. That's not; those are not voices that were common in my life. So now it is more in my uh, sort of understanding about how in this that even that whole medical versus independent living model, helps inform clinical practitioners, which is what I'm going to school for, in order to not try and fix people. And that's kind of a big difference between uh, the kind of perspective one would have before and after a formal education, because there's just not that much present literature if you're not living in those communities about what it's like living with a visible or invisible disability, what it's like engaging in the world as someone who's completely capable, all but the society itself making things hard on you. And this is why accessibility is such a big topic rather than the medical model of, well, let's just make everyone bionic or whatever. Some people, uh, the thing is options, giving people the opportunity to engage or not engage in medicine. So, yes, that's the big thing where my morality is still the same. We want people to be happy. We don't want them to be invisible. But previously, prior to formal education, I probably didn't understand, or I most certainly didn't, even with people with different accessibility issues in my life. That's the big difference. Is that being heard is not something like the way society is constructed is not an accommodation that people are head patted with, and that it's not about accommodation. It's about making sure that everyone has a equal opportunity to live independently and successfully. And so focusing all of our society's energy on erasing disability is probably A, fruitless, and B, really putting people whose lived experiences are involved in those communities and those conditions, it's probably putting them in a pretty rough place. So, as far as, I don't know, just a basic declared humanity. And well, that's why I was getting at about shoot too. I might misspeak sometimes, but that was that's where I came around to. I don't think you can start uh, from a place where you think you know everything and then end up in a place where you know everything. I certainly didn't think I knew everything, but I certainly thought I knew where I stood on, progressive issues and things like that. And via a formal education and lots of readings and being able to understand where to find information. Now I've found a lot more perspectives on things that are certainly relevant, not just to my daily life, but to my eventual career as well. Um, I'd say the second part about an education that's important is just being able to interact with literature and media in a different way. And this isn't something that needs to be framed as antagonistic. It's not like you could see through them everyone's lies or anything like that, because the uh, top down truth. And I think it's more of a understanding that with a background in the humanities as far as the history of communication and a background in science as far as how data is collected, including our data rich society. You can ignore data and ignore science, but that's certainly not going to make you right. That's going to make you very much a feelings person. So when we're looking at data as far as any studies, as far as what people believe and what I don't know, what's effective as far as medicine or policy, is that with an education you can look at the study and see how it was conducted and whether or not there's holes in that and is valid, who conducted it, why they conducted it. Um, Now, does this sound like something that you need to go to 4 years of 2 to 4 years of college for? People might argue about that. Or like, if it takes a 4 credit course in research methods to be able to debunk someone's self-funded climate change denial study, why do you need a combined 120 college credits? Isn't that just grifting if you only need the 4? That's quite an increase. That's from 4 to 120 just to be able to accurately read a study correctly and sniff out the lies. They are lies. Any debunking would be, depending on the source. But point being is like there's a lot more going on than just this and that. There's I don't I wouldn't have any background in uh, death studies or on one hand or social psychology or more specifically, that's 2 classes. A different study, or not a study, a different course would be uh, the way incarceration impacts all Americans, That would be 3, 4, 5. I I should have it written down, but I don't. But I think I'm up to 21 psychology courses. I pretty much went through the whole catalog. Uh, I'm I'm missing lots of higher level ones that are more specific, like psychology and film, and but point being, 20 is a lot, and they're all very focused on different issues, and being educated in certain ones isn't really necessarily a thing where, okay, they had to spoon feed it and spell it out to you about how, we view old people as icky as far as psychology of aging. And is that people of advancing age are uh, rendered invisible by our culture, and but beyond that, make themselves invisible closer to death because they're withdrawing because of the stigma involved with the condition that we all go through. Like, the statistical makeup of how prevalent that is, and the institutional makeup of how our medical system fails to support anyone proactively and instead uses this patient model to, I don't know, it just forces them into a corner and it makes them feel like a problem rather than a person anymore. So rather than the good times being ahead, they're just pretty much, please die already. And that's that's not something, that's not a perspective that you easily get from just basic advocacy, where the data of not just healthcare officials but psychologists and most importantly interviewing people working through the system, that's where we get proper perspectives, and that's not something that comes with an informal reading of just going through literature willy nilly. Formal education offers frameworks, and this is why they're presented as a formal framework of an actual class. And when you go through the class, you're expected to understand certain things by the end of it. Probably do some critical writing, write a paper about it, just to demonstrate that you can synthesize and do some creative thinking about the information that's given you. Point being, in the end, I'm going to wrap it up now, is that the point of an education, a formal education, isn't just a license to perform certain jobs, is that it gives you a lot of really interesting tools about how to engage in the world that you may not have beforehand, no matter how good you are at independent research. Uh, as I was a writer that researched the crap out of all things sciency for creative writing and novels and things like that. I was definitely a student of the 4 hours a day of reading stuff, and yeah, does that translate to academia? Well, the research methods, the methods of researching and finding information and things like that translated really well. So yeah, good for me. But the point being is that, yeah, my general knowledge and preconceived notions about what the lives different people had didn't translate so well. Not that it translated poorly, but yeah, there was some learning to do, and it was definitely beneficial. And I looking back at my undergrad, that was 4 years of my 30s that I greatly appreciate, and yeah, if given a second chance, I'd do it all again easily. I wouldn't do it better. I'd probably, I don't know, understand that I don't need a 98 on everything. A 91's good enough as far as trust or testing stress goes. All that aside, yeah, even if you're a really smart cookie, I would totally advise giving college a try when you're ready, because it'll do more than open doors for a career that isn't food service, raising my hand for food service. So it'll do more than just raising your or giving you opportunities that aren't food service. It'll do a lot for just how you look at the issues that are important to you. Disability, aging, psychology, all these things have been media studies. All these things have been important to me throughout my entire life. But having a formal framework in order to not just discuss them but review them has probably been, I don't know, the most personally gratifying part of it. It's definitely changed the way I interact with not just people in my life. It's changed my relationship with myself and society at large. So it's it's also calmed my ass down a lot. Like it's really nice having a foundation where you can be thoughtful about conversations. And one thing that a lot of postgraduate people don't do is browbeat people with their education. So I know we'll find examples to counterpoint that, but yeah, you'll find a nice group of people that are just happy being professionals and are comfortable in their own skin. And I think a formal education does give you that. You just yeah, there's not a lot of not a lot to prove, especially on the internet spaces. So you just end up kind of calm and lucid, and that's nice. So, thank you for listening.